The Zodiac Killer, a mystery unfolds. Introduction. The late 1960s in Northern California was a time of social upheaval and transformation. The counterculture movement was in full swing, and the region was a hub for change. But beneath the surface of this vibrant era, a dark and chilling story began to emerge, one that would terrorize communities, baffle investigators, and spawn one of the most infamous unsolved mysteries in American history. This is the story of the Zodiac Killer, a faceless figure who lurked in the shadows, striking fear into the hearts of residents, taunting police with cryptic messages, and leaving behind a trail of blood that has never been fully traced. The Zodiac's first known attack occurred on a cold December night in 1968, marking the beginning of a brutal killing spree that would leave the entire region gripped with fear. But it wasn't just the killings that made the Zodiac infamous. It was the way he played a twisted game with law enforcement and the public, sending cryptic ciphers, letters, and terrifying threats that have yet to be fully deciphered. The Zodiac case is a labyrinthine puzzle that decades later remains unsolved, its pieces scattered across time and memory. The early murders. On December 20th, 1968, two high school sweethearts, Betty Lou Jensen and David Faraday, drove out to Lake Herman Road, a remote lover's lane near Benicia, California. It was supposed to be a night of young romance, but it ended in tragedy. Betty Lou was a 16-year-old high school student with a bright future ahead of her. She was known as a responsible and studious young woman, active in her church and beloved by her friends. David, also 17, was a serious young man who had dreams of becoming a doctor. Their date that night was one of innocence and hope, a typical outing for teenagers in a small town. But their lives were cut tragically short when an unknown assailant approached their vehicle and opened fire without warning. At approximately 11 p.m., the attacker fired multiple shots into the car, hitting David in the head at close range as he sat in the driver's seat. Betty Lou, in a desperate attempt to flee, was gunned down as she ran. Her body was found lying in the dirt, bullet wounds tracing her final steps. The scene was eerily silent when police arrived, with no witnesses, no suspects, and no apparent motive. The randomness and brutality of the attack shocked the small community. Parents, once comfortable allowing their children the freedom to explore and socialize, became fearful. The local police were baffled. There were no leads, no evidence, nothing to suggest why anyone would want to kill these two young people. 7 months later, on July 4th, 1969, another young couple was targeted. Darlene Ferrin, 22, was a lively and outgoing woman who worked as a waitress. She was married but had a complicated personal life, and some speculate that this may have played a role in the events of that night. Michael Mageau, 19, was her companion for the evening, a shy and quiet young man who was still in the process of finding his way in life. The two were parked in Darlene's car at Blue Rock Springs Park in Vallejo, just a few miles from the site of the first attack. As they sat talking, a car pulled up beside them. The driver briefly left before returning and parking behind them. He then approached their vehicle with a flashlight and began firing a 9mm Luger through the window. Darlene was shot multiple times and died shortly after. Michael, despite being critically wounded, survived. Michael's account provided the first crucial details of the Zodiac's appearance: a stocky man, possibly in his late 20s or early 30s, with short, light brown hair. He recalled how the killer had methodically shot them, paused, and then returned to fire again, ensuring his victims were dead. The precision and cold-blooded nature of the attack suggested a calculated mind, someone who took pleasure in controlling life and death. But it was what happened next that truly set this crime apart. Less than an hour later, a call was made to the Vallejo Police Department from a nearby payphone. The voice on the other end calmly stated, "I want to report a double murder. I also killed those kids last year." The call was traced, but the killer had already vanished into the night. The cryptic ciphers. The morning of August 1st, 1969, brought a new wave of terror. 3 nearly identical letters arrived at the offices of the Vallejo Times-Herald, the San Francisco Chronicle, and the San Francisco Examiner. The letters were written in an unsettling, blocky script and contained detailed information about the murders that had not been released to the public. But what truly set these letters apart was the 408-character cipher included with each one, a cryptogram that the writer claimed would reveal his identity. The Zodiac demanded that the ciphers be printed on the front page of each newspaper, warning that if his demands were not met, he would kill again. The ciphers captivated the public, and amateur cryptographers across the country scrambled to crack the code. These letters were more than just a taunt. They were a challenge, a macabre game designed to ensnare the minds of those who dared to play. The idea that a killer could hide his identity in plain sight, encoded in a seemingly random jumble of symbols, was terrifying. What if the cipher contained a clue that could stop the next murder? What if it was all just a ruse to toy with the public's fears? After a few days, Donald and Betty Harden, a schoolteacher and his wife from Salinas, California, successfully decoded the message. The solution was as disturbing as the crimes themselves. I like killing people because it is so much fun. It is more fun than killing wild game in the forest because man is the most dangerous animal of all. The message went on to boast about the thrill of killing and hinted at more murders to come. But it ended with a taunt. I will not give you my name because you will try to slow down or stop my collecting of slaves for my afterlife. This cryptic and haunting message added a new layer of complexity to the case. The Zodiac wasn't just a killer. He was a predator who saw himself as superior to his human prey, a master of life and death. The partial solution of the cipher only deepened the mystery. Despite the message's gruesome content, the killer's identity remained hidden, and 2 sections of the code were never deciphered, leaving behind more questions than answers. Over the years, countless attempts have been made to crack the remaining ciphers. Some believe that the key to solving them lies in understanding the killer's mind, a mind that reveled in puzzles, that delighted in causing confusion and fear. Others have speculated that the unsolved ciphers contain deliberate errors, red herrings meant to mislead anyone who tried to decipher them. The lack of a clear solution has only fueled the mythos of the Zodiac, making him a ghost who communicates from beyond, laughing at those who try to unmask him. Escalation and taunts. Just when it seemed the Zodiac couldn't become any more terrifying, he escalated his attacks. On September 27, 1969, college students Brian Hartnell and Cecilia Shepard were enjoying a peaceful afternoon at Lake Berryessa, another secluded spot in Napa County. They were lying on a blanket near the water when a man approached them, wearing an executioner-style hood with clip-on sunglasses covering the eye holes and a cross-circle symbol emblazoned on his chest. The sight was bizarre and terrifying, a scene straight out of a nightmare. The man brandished a gun and claimed to be an escaped convict from Deer Lodge Prison in Montana, needing money and a car to flee to Mexico. He ordered Brian and Cecilia to tie each other up with pre-cut lengths of plastic clothesline, and once they were bound, he methodically began stabbing them both with a long knife. Brian was stabbed 6 times, Cecilia 10. After the attack, the man casually walked to Brian's car and used a black felt-tip pen to write a message on the door, detailing the time of the attack and signing it with the same cross-circle symbol. He then walked to a nearby payphone and called the police to report the crime, calmly taking credit for the attack. Cecilia died 2 days later from her injuries, but Brian miraculously survived and provided a detailed description of the attacker. The killer's strange costume and ritualistic behavior only added to the growing fear that the Zodiac was not just a murderer, but someone who derived deep satisfaction from terrorizing his victims and the community at large. 2 weeks later, the Zodiac struck again, this time in the heart of San Francisco. On October 11, 1969, Paul Stein, a 29-year-old cab driver, was shot in the head at point-blank range while driving in the upscale neighborhood of Presidio Heights. The killer removed a piece of Stein's shirt and wiped down the cab to remove fingerprints before casually walking away. Several witnesses saw a man leaving the scene, but confusion over the suspect's description allowed the Zodiac to slip through the police dragnet. Stein's murder was different from the previous attacks. It was in an urban setting, in a busy neighborhood, and seemed almost reckless compared to the Zodiac's earlier crimes. The killer's actions suggested a growing confidence, perhaps even a desire to be caught, or at least to demonstrate his ability to outwit the police. But despite the change in modus operandi, the Zodiac remained elusive. 3 days later, the San Francisco Chronicle received another letter from the Zodiac. This time, it included a piece of Paul Stein's blood-stained shirt, proving that the writer was indeed the killer. The letter also taunted the police, boasting about his escape and threatening to target schoolchildren next. This brazen attack in a populated area and the killer's continued taunts marked a turning point in the case. The Zodiac was no longer just a regional menace. He had become a national obsession. The threat against schoolchildren sparked panic across the Bay Area. Parents were terrified to send their kids to school, and police presence was ramped up around educational institutions. The idea that the Zodiac could target the most innocent of victims sent shockwaves through the community. For a time, the fear was palpable, with every strange car or unfamiliar face becoming a potential threat. But despite the heightened alert, the Zodiac did not follow through on his threat. Instead, he continued his pattern of sending taunting letters, playing with the public's fear while remaining in the shadows. His next letter, sent on November 8, 1969, included a 340-character cipher that remains unsolved to this day. The letter also contained more details about the Stein murder and claimed that the police had missed their chance to catch him. This unsolved cipher, often referred to as the Z340, has puzzled experts for decades. It is one of the most famous unsolved codes in the world, and numerous cryptographers have tried to unlock its secrets. Some believe it contains the Zodiac's real name, while others think it might be a meaningless jumble of symbols designed to frustrate anyone who attempts to decode it. The mystery of the Z340 has kept the Zodiac case alive in the minds of many, serving as a tantalizing clue that could one day break the case wide open. The search for the Zodiac. The Zodiac investigation quickly became one of the most extensive manhunts in US history. Law enforcement agencies from local police departments to the FBI were involved, sifting through thousands of tips and interviewing hundreds of suspects. The list of potential Zodiac killers was long and varied, but one name stood out: Arthur Lee Allen. Allen, a former schoolteacher, came to the attention of investigators early on. He had a history of troubling behavior, and several people, including one of his friends, claimed he had made incriminating statements about enjoying the idea of killing people. Additionally, Allen's physical appearance matched descriptions provided by witnesses, and he was known to wear a Zodiac brand wristwatch that bore the same cross-circle symbol used by the killer. In 1971, a search warrant was executed at Allen's home, where investigators found numerous items that seemed to link him to the Zodiac, including cryptic notes and potentially suspicious material. However, despite the circumstantial evidence, no direct link to the murders could be established. Handwriting experts concluded that Allen's handwriting did not match the Zodiac's letters, and fingerprints found at crime scenes did not match Allen's either. While Allen remained a prime suspect, the lack of definitive evidence meant he was never charged with the crimes. He died in 1992, his involvement in the case unresolved. Another suspect that has drawn considerable attention is Richard Gaikowski, a journalist and filmmaker with radical political views. Gaikowski was involved in the counterculture movement and had connections to several of the Zodiac's victims through the alternative press. Some have pointed to his possible resemblance to the Zodiac's composite sketch, and the fact that he was in the right place at the right time for some of the murders. However, like with Allen, there is no definitive evidence linking Gaikowski to the crimes. In more recent years, advances in DNA technology have breathed new life into the investigation. In 2002, a partial DNA profile was extracted from saliva found on a Zodiac letter, and this evidence has been used to rule out several suspects, including Alan. However, the DNA sample is incomplete, and it's unclear if it came from the killer or someone else who handled the letter. Despite these limitations, the hope remains that DNA could eventually lead to a breakthrough in the case. Over the years, many other suspects have been suggested, and countless theories have emerged. Some have pointed to other men who lived in the Bay Area at the time, while others have speculated that the Zodiac was a transient, moving from place to place to avoid detection. The case has inspired endless speculation, with amateur sleuths and professional investigators alike continuing to seek answers to this day. One of the most compelling theories suggests that the Zodiac might have been more than one person. Some investigators have noted differences in the handwriting and language of the letters, leading them to believe that there could have been multiple individuals involved in the crimes. This theory could explain the wide range of physical descriptions provided by witnesses and the varied locations of the attacks. However, the idea of a Zodiac group remains controversial and unproven. The Zodiac case has also been marked by jurisdictional conflicts and missed opportunities. The crimes occurred across multiple counties, each with its own police department, and the lack of coordination between agencies hampered the investigation. Key evidence was sometimes not shared between departments, and critical leads were lost in the shuffle. These issues highlight the challenges of investigating a serial killer in an era before modern communication and forensic techniques. The legacy of fear. The Zodiac Killer's reign of terror has left an indelible mark on Northern California and the broader field of criminal investigation. His crimes shattered the sense of safety that once existed in the region, as no one could be sure who might be the next target. The randomness of his attacks, the calculated nature of his taunts, and his ability to evade capture despite the intense scrutiny of law enforcement set him apart from other serial killers of his era. Even more than 50 years after the Zodiac's last confirmed communication, his legacy endures. He is a figure of fear and fascination, a spectre who haunts the world of true crime. The ciphers he left behind, some of which remain unsolved, continue to tantalize cryptographers and puzzle enthusiasts, offering the possibility that the key to his identity might still be out there, hidden in plain sight. The Zodiac story has been immortalized in books, documentaries, and films, each trying to capture the terror and mystery that defined the case. Yet, despite the passage of time and the advances in forensic science, the Zodiac remains an unsolved enigma, a puzzle that has yet to be fully unraveled. The case has also had a profound impact on the families of the victims and the surviving witnesses. For them, the Zodiac is not just a historical figure or a true crime curiosity. He is a source of enduring pain and loss. The inability to find justice has left deep scars, and the fear that the killer might still be out there, living an ordinary life, is a haunting thought. The Zodiac case has also shaped the way law enforcement approaches serial killer investigations. The need for better communication between jurisdictions, the importance of preserving evidence, and the value of psychological profiling are all lessons that have been drawn from the Zodiac investigation. The case has also highlighted the challenges of solving crimes that involve a significant degree of planning and deception on the part of the perpetrator. In the end, the Zodiac Killer is a symbol of the darkness that can lurk in the human soul, a reminder that sometimes the most dangerous monsters are the ones that remain hidden. As long as his identity remains a mystery, the Zodiac will continue to haunt the annals of true crime, a ghostly figure whose story has no clear end. The quest to unmask the Zodiac continues, with new technologies and fresh eyes being applied to the case. But until that final piece of the puzzle is found, the Zodiac will remain an enigma, a shadow that looms large over the history of American crime.